The Dershow.
Remember, after the Second World War, so many countries took land from so many other countries. The Soviet Union took the entire city of Königsberg and just annexed it into Russia. There were no Russians living there. There were all Germans living there. What the Russians did, what the Soviets did, is they expelled every single German, and they send in 100,000 Russians, and they just took over the land. Ethnic cleansing, all of that. Nobody complained. And the United Nations was in existence, beginning to be in existence at that time, or what the winning side in the Second World War did to the German citizens of Czechoslovakia in an area called Sudetenland, which was part of sovereign Czechoslovakia. But because the German-speaking people of Sudetenland had supported the Nazis, in order to prevent a recurrence, the Allies ethnically cleansed every single ethnic German from Sudetenland, made them leave. They had lived there for 200 years with their families, and filled the land with Czech citizens. Was that ethnic cleansing? Was that in violation of international law? Well, we don't know, because nobody brought charges. It was part of the process of bringing about peace and avoiding a recurrence. Remember, countries learned an awful lesson after World War I. They thought World War I was the war to end all wars. And then within a very short time, we got World War II, because the end of World War I didn't solve the problems. It just exacerbated them. Bibi Netanyahu is very much a historian. His father was a historian. He's very academic. We sat at dinner discussing these matters. Our wives very actively participated. They're good friends. And, we discussed everything. We discussed the growth of anti-Semitism in America. We discussed universities. We discussed whether, Trump was doing the right thing. Was he overreacting? Was he underreacting? Every subject of mutual interest was on the table. And, it was it's very nice to be able to sit and have dinner with one of the most important people in the world. Whether you agree with them or disagree with them, Benjamin Netanyahu is a world leader, as is Donald Trump. I've had dinner with Donald Trump. I've enjoyed them as well, but I've also had dinner with, Barack Obama and with Bill Clinton and other important world leaders. And, it's a great privilege and a great honor to be able to sit in a room and spend time with people who really have an impact on the world. And if they're willing to listen to you, it's a very positive thing. That doesn't mean he's going to come away and make a list saying, "Oh, this is what Alan said. I'll do this, A, B, C, D, E, F, G." We discussed like 7 or 8 things. I'm not at liberty to say what they were, but we discussed 7 or 8 things, and he was interested largely in 1 or 2 of them, in particular. And I'm going to get back to him with my analysis of those issues, and he will either accept them or reject them. I don't work for him, and he doesn't work for me. He just likes my ideas. He thinks that I can maybe add to what he has been told by his very excellent subordinates and staff, and I'm very happy to provide that input, knowing that much of what I tell him probably will be ignored. I have the same relationship with President Trump. He calls me on occasion. I give him advice. Sometimes he follows it. Sometimes he doesn't follow it. I've had the same relationship with Bill Clinton. I had the same relationship with, believe it or not, Barack Obama. He called me to the Oval Office. We sat down. We discussed Iran. We discussed some of the same issues I discussed with Benjamin Netanyahu. And in the case of Obama, he promised me that he would do certain things, and he broke his promise. That caused me to terminate my relationship with him, because I came to the conclusion that he wasn't being straight with me. And Bibi's always straight with me, and he always tells me what he thinks, and I always tell him what I think. And when we were in the cab on the way home, my wife was telling me that he thought Bibi was very interested in some of my ideas, not so much with others of my ideas. And he put asterisks next to a couple of them, and I'm going to look at those and give him my best analysis, my legal analysis. That's what I'm best at. But he'll do the political analysis, but I'll give him the legal analysis and maybe contribute a little bit of my thinking about the strategic analysis. So we'll see what he accepts and doesn't accept. Look, we're a long way from peacefully resolving the issue in the Middle East. We also discussed Ukraine and whether or not the president will be able to bring about a ceasefire this weekend when he meets Putin in Alaska, and what Zelensky will do. So it was a very, very broad-ranging discussion. As you know, I can't tell you what he said or what I said substantively, but I can tell you just what issues we covered. This is a very common thing with us. Whenever we get together, we have these discussions. I value them enormously. I hope he values them at least somewhat. He, asked me to do this, and so of course I would say yes. By the way, I would say yes for any American president or any Israeli prime minister. I would give advice to Republicans and Democrats alike, and likewise with Israel. I've given advice to more liberal prime ministers like Ehud Olmert and Ehud Barak, and I've given advice to Benjamin Netanyahu, and I will continue to do that. It's one of the great privileges of a professor is to be able to, teach, and I've had 10,000 students over my years, and some of them have been influenced by my thinking, some have not been. But, like with being a teacher, I never try to teach my students what to think. I always try to teach them how to think. Same thing is true in my conversations with world leaders. I just try to help analyze the problem. I lay out options. I tell them what I think the legal considerations are on both sides. Ultimately, he's elected, not me. He's going to make the decision, and he's going to be responsible for the decision. In my speech, I started by quoting the Bible. In the Bible, in the book of Deuteronomy, God says to the people, I have placed before you a choice between life and death, between blessing and curse. Therefore, choose life. This was one of the first times in a religious context free will is really asserted. God says, I have placed before you the choice. You have the choice. You make it. You decide whether you support life or death. And in my speech, I said, Israel has chosen life. It has chosen in every instance to prefer life and to try to minimize lethal consequences, whereas the Hamas has chosen death. It uses death as a tactic. It uses terrorism as a tactic. And the question is, will the world accept terrorism as a tactic, or will it prefer to use the law? And I have to tell you, if these countries, France and England and some of the other countries, as I've mentioned, if they reward October 7th, it's going to send a message to every terrorist group in the world. Don't bother to negotiate. You're not going to get anywhere. Just go to terror. And look what happens. You're going to get your way. Hamas killed 1,200 people, raped, beheaded, burned, and then took 250 as hostages. And look, they got a state. They got recognition of a state. The PA, the Palestinian Authority, tried to negotiate. It never got a state. So use history, use common sense. If you have two choices, terrorism, it works, or legal methods. It doesn't seem to work all that well. I wrote a book some years ago called Why Terrorism Works. And the answer was very simple: because it works. It works because it works, because they get their way. When terrorist groups terrorize governments and people, often they get their way. And so, of course, they're going to engage in more terrorism. And success breeds repetition, and failure is an often. And so, that was my meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu. We may again meet before my visit here is over. Still trying to see if there's any possibility that I can get into Gaza to see with my own eyes the situation.